He thought he was invisible, untouchable, just a blur in the night, gone before anyone even realized what had happened. He planned every detail, cleaned up every trace, and chose a location so quiet, so overlooked, it practically whispered, "You'll get away with it." And for a few days, it looked like he would. No suspects, no witnesses, no motive, just a body, left cold, broken, and abandoned like yesterday's trash. But what this killer didn't know was that a single, silent witness had been watching the entire time. No heartbeat, no breath, just one blinking red light that saw everything and recorded his every move. Right now, I want you to ask yourself this. How many times have you walked past a security camera and never noticed it? We're all so used to them now. Grocery stores, gas stations, parking lots, even someone's front porch. They've become background noise in our daily lives. But what if I told you that one of those little blinking dots, the kind you'd normally ignore, held the key to unlocking a twisted murder mystery that had an entire town on edge? What if the one thing that shattered a killer's perfect plan wasn't a detective, but a $40 piece of plastic mounted outside a stranger's home? You came here for answers. I know that. You want to know what happened, who did it, and how they got caught. And I promise you this, by the end of this video, you're going to get every piece of the truth you came here for. But you need to stay with me because this isn't just about solving a murder. This is about understanding how one tiny mistake, one frame of footage can crack a killer wide open. Let me talk to you directly here, one-on-one, because this story, it's going to mess with your head. Not because of the violence or even the crime itself. It's because of how human it all is. This case isn't about some deranged stranger who randomly snapped. It's about someone who knew what they were doing, someone calculated, careful, and completely convinced they could outsmart the system. It's the kind of story that forces you to question how well you really know the people around you. And while most YouTube videos might skim the surface of cases like this, we're going deep. We're going inside the mind of a killer. We're going behind closed doors. And we're going to show you how something as small as a security camera became the ultimate trap. The town this happened in isn't the kind of place you'd expect something like this. It's not a big city, not a dangerous neighborhood. It's a quiet community tucked away just enough to make people feel safe, leaving their doors unlocked. The kind of town where everyone knows everyone. Or at least they think they do. And that's what makes this case so chilling. Because the killer wasn't a stranger. He wasn't some shadowy figure lurking in an alley. He was one of them. Someone people waved to at the gas station. Someone who smiled during block parties and raked his leaves like everyone else. But behind that friendly facade was a darkness that no one saw coming until it was too late. You're going to meet Detective Sarah Holt in just a moment. She's the one who took on this case when nobody else knew where to start. No DNA. No fingerprints. No weapon. Just a single piece of grainy footage that didn't even look like much at first. A figure in the dark. A motion that didn't make sense. Something about it caught her eye, and thank God it did. Because if it hadn't, this killer might still be walking free today. Sarah's been in law enforcement for over 20 years, but she told reporters later that this was the case that kept her up at night. The one that forced her to think like a killer just to figure out what really happened. Now, don't get me wrong. This isn't one of those high-tech CSI-style cases with perfect forensics and instant answers. No, this was messy, confusing, emotional. And that's exactly why it's real. This is the kind of investigation that builds tension slowly, piece by piece, where one clue leads to another, and then suddenly you're looking at someone you never expected. That's what makes it so addictive and so terrifying. Because once the truth starts to unravel, it does so fast. And when it hits hard. But let's not jump too far ahead. You need to meet the victim first. Her name was Emily Carter, 32 years old, a schoolteacher, lived alone in a modest home just off the main road. Known for her kindness, her community involvement, and her smile, she wasn't the kind of person to make enemies. In fact, she seemed to go out of her way to avoid conflict. So when she didn't show up to work one Monday morning, her colleagues were concerned, but not panicked.
People get sick.
Cars break down.
Phones die.
But when hours turned into a full day, and still no word from Emily. Someone made the call. And what police found when they entered her home was the stuff of nightmares. I'll spare you the worst of it for now. But what I will tell you is this. There were signs of a struggle. Furniture overturned. Blood. Enough to suggest this wasn't an accident. And most haunting of all, Emily's front door was locked from the inside. So whoever did this, they didn't just kill her. They took the time to stage it, to erase themselves from the scene, to leave behind nothing but questions. The killer believed they were meticulous,
Smart.
one step ahead of everyone. And for a while, they were. But remember that blinking red light I told you about earlier? The one no one noticed? That camera belonged to Emily's neighbor, an elderly man named Frank Jennings. He had no idea his porch cam, meant to keep porch pirates away, was about to become the center of a murder investigation. In fact, he almost didn't check the footage at all. But something told him to. And when he did, he found something that didn't belong. A movement in the corner of the frame. A shape. A figure. Just enough to raise a question that would become the beginning of the end for the man who thought he'd gotten away with murder. What did Frank see?
Who was in that footage?
And how did that blurry clip, barely 2 seconds long, become the linchpin that cracked the case wide open? That's what you're about to find out. But be warned, this story only gets darker from here. And just when you think you've figured it all out, everything changes. Emily Carter's last few days had been remarkably ordinary, which, in hindsight, made everything even more disturbing. Her friends described her as calm, predictable, and perhaps even a little too trusting. She went to work, came home, fed her cat, and texted her sister every night around 9. There were no signs of distress, no messages that hinted at fear, no sudden shifts in behavior. The Friday before she disappeared, she stayed late at school to grade papers, then stopped by a local grocery store to pick up a bottle of wine and a frozen pizza. Security footage confirmed that. She smiled at the cashier, made a joke about the weather, and then drove off into the night like she'd done 100 times before. But what nobody realized then was that someone else was watching her, not just that night, but for weeks before. Someone had been paying close attention, learning her patterns, waiting for the moment when no one else would be around. Her neighbor Frank had lived next door for over a decade. He remembered Emily moving in 5 years earlier, cheerful and bubbly, immediately offering to help him carry groceries even though they'd never met. He said she was the type who brought cookies during the holidays and mowed her own lawn without complaint. The perfect neighbor. And like most people in the neighborhood, he couldn't imagine anyone having a reason to hurt her. But something had changed lately. Frank mentioned that he hadn't seen Emily outside as much in the past few weeks. Her porch light, which used to click on like clockwork at sunset, had been flickering, sometimes off for days at a time. He also mentioned a car. A dark SUV that he didn't recognize. It would park across the street late at night, engine off, windows up, just sitting there. Once or twice, Frank thought he saw someone inside, but by the time he grabbed his glasses or got to the window, it was gone. Police canvassed the area and found nothing unusual, at least, not at first. No forced entry. No alarms triggered. No neighbors heard screams. But when they pulled the data from Emily's phone, something odd stood out. Several calls from an unknown number, short calls, always under a minute, starting about a month prior. The calls were too brief to be traced in any meaningful way, and Emily never saved the number. But she had answered at least 5 of them. One theory was that it could have been a scammer, but the timing didn't sit right. The last call came just 2 days before her murder, and that's when things took a strange turn. Her sister, Rachel, remembered Emily sounding weird that night. Not scared exactly, more like distracted, distant. Emily had brushed it off as work stress and promised they'd talk more over the weekend. That weekend never came. As investigators began piecing together Emily's social life, the list of people close to her was surprisingly short. She wasn't dating anyone, didn't have any exes she stayed in contact with, and aside from coworkers and a few old friends, she mostly kept to herself. But one name did come up more than once: Jacob Mercer. He'd been a parent of one of her students the year before, and though he seemed polite during parent-teacher conferences, there were rumors that he developed an interest in Emily beyond what was appropriate. One teacher recalled Jacob waiting unusually long in the parking lot after meetings, just lingering near his truck, as if hoping to catch her leaving. Another remembered Emily laughing it off, saying he was just one of those awkward single dads, but the laughter didn't reach her eyes. The problem was, Jacob had moved away several months earlier, transferred his kid to another school, and no one had heard from him since. When police ran his name, they discovered he had a sealed misdemeanor from a few years back, something related to harassment, but nothing they could act on without more evidence. Still, Jacob wasn't the only one acting strangely. There was also Devin Clark, a janitor at Emily's school. Quiet, unassuming, always keeping to himself. Most teachers barely noticed him. But when questioned, Devin fumbled through his alibi and grew visibly nervous when asked if he'd ever been inside Emily's classroom after hours. He said no, but his swipe card told a different story. He'd accessed her floor 3 nights in a row the week before the murder, long after everyone else had gone home. When asked why, he claimed he'd been cleaning. Yet the cleaning schedule didn't match his times, and no one could verify if any cleaning was actually done. Then there was the matter of Emily's missing laptop. Her school-issued computer had vanished from her home. Not her personal laptop, just the work one. And the odd part? Devin would have had access to it if he'd taken it from the school, but not if she'd brought it home. So was it stolen the night of the murder, or had it disappeared before? More uncertainty arose when police finally tracked down a set of street cam recordings from a gas station 2 blocks away. The footage, grainy and low-res, showed a vehicle matching the description Frank had given. A dark SUV rolling slowly through the neighborhood around 1:47 a.m. on the night Emily died. The license plate was too blurry to read, but something about the driver's posture looked off, hunched forward, glancing repeatedly in the rearview mirror. And though no one could confirm it for sure, it looked like the same SUV showed up again 2 nights later, just driving in circles. Watching. Red herrings began to multiply. One theory suggested that Emily had discovered something at school, something big. A grade tampering scandal, maybe, or misconduct between students and staff. A whistleblower angle. But as detectives dug through emails, paper trails, and interviews, nothing materialized to back that theory up. Another tip pointed to a local handyman who'd been seen fixing Emily's back gate earlier that month. But when questioned, he produced a receipt and a time-stamped photo of the completed job. Dead end. As leads twisted into more dead ends, the pressure built. News outlets had begun reporting the case, and the story was trending under tags like unsolved murder, true crime documentary, and caught on camera. People online speculated wildly, some believing it was a random break-in gone wrong, others convinced it was someone she knew. Reddit threads popped up overnight, sharing maps, photos, wild theories. Everyone had an opinion, but no one had the answer. And then, finally, Frank's camera footage hit the desk of Detective Holt. A single frame from a night with no noise, no disturbance. Just a shadow moving across Emily's yard. Barely visible. But if you slowed the footage down frame by frame, you could see it. A shape. A man. Wearing something dark. Turning slightly toward the lens, not realizing he was being recorded. For a split second, his face is partially visible. Not enough to make an ID, but enough for Holt to know one thing for sure. This wasn't random. Someone had been watching her, and that someone made one mistake. Just enough to crack the surface of a perfect plan. Detective Holt was no rookie. He'd seen his fair share of disturbing crime scenes and cracked cases that had baffled his colleagues for months, but something about Emily Carter's murder felt different. Deeper, more personal, like the killer was toying with them. As soon as that blurry frame from Frank's security camera was enhanced and shared internally, Holt felt like they were getting close. Too close. He sent it to a tech team to clean up and run against the facial recognition database, hoping they'd get a hit. But just 2 days later, the footage vanished from the system.
Gone.
Not corrupted, deleted. Completely wiped. Holt was furious. The department launched a quiet internal audit, but there were no signs of unauthorized access. The only trace of the video was Holt's personal copy, which he'd saved to a private drive, a move that would later turn out to be the only reason the image survived. Then came the message. No return address. Just a plain envelope on his desk one morning with the words, "You don't know who you're dealing with." Inside was a single photo of Holt leaving his daughter's school. A clear, close-up shot, taken without his knowledge. It was meant to scare him, and it worked. Holt didn't rattle easily, but now he knew he was being watched, just like Emily had been. And whoever was behind it wasn't bluffing. This wasn't just about Emily anymore. It was personal, and it was turning into something far bigger than a single murder. While Holt tried to keep the threat under wraps and continue his investigation quietly, another strange detail emerged. Emily's missing laptop pinged. Not in the city. Not even in the state. It was traced to a small town in Montana, logged into public Wi-Fi at a motel chain. By the time authorities got there, the device was gone again. No sign of the user. No fingerprints. Just a vague check-in under a fake name. The movement suggested that whoever had the laptop was either trying to cover their tracks or using it to lead investigators in the wrong direction. Either way, Holt now had to consider the possibility that Emily's killer wasn't acting alone and might even have help from someone inside the system. The deeper Holt dug into Emily's life, the stranger things became. He tracked down an old college roommate who mentioned something Emily had never told anyone. During her senior year, Emily had dated a man who suddenly disappeared. His name was Luke Madison, and he wasn't just a boyfriend. He was someone Emily had considered marrying. But one night, after an argument, Luke vanished. No goodbye, no breakup, just gone. The college's security team chalked it up to a voluntary disappearance. No foul play suspected. But now, more than 10 years later, Holt uncovered that Luke had resurfaced in another state, under a new identity. And get this, he'd legally changed his name less than 6 months before Emily's death. Holt couldn't ignore the possibility. Was Luke back in her life? Did he have a motive? But just as he began filing paperwork to issue a background check, the system locked him out. Not just his account. His whole clearance level was temporarily revoked, flagged for suspicious access behavior. A convenient excuse for a technical error, or was someone deliberately trying to stall him? The department told him it was an automatic lock, likely a glitch, but Holt knew better. Someone wanted this case cold. Meanwhile, Emily's sister Rachel began receiving anonymous messages on social media. Harmless at first, generic condolences, vague questions about Emily's past, but then the tone shifted. One message stood out. She should have stayed quiet. Rachel brought the screenshots to Holt, her hands shaking. She hadn't shared anything online that would provoke this kind of attention, and yet someone knew she was digging too. That's when a new name surfaced. Melissa Graves, a fellow teacher at Emily's school. Quiet, well-liked, dependable. But during a second round of interviews, Holt noticed something odd. Melissa was nervous, more than she should have been. She kept glancing at her phone, dodging eye contact, answering questions with rehearsed politeness. When asked about the dark SUV, she claimed she'd never seen it. But Holt later learned that Melissa's brother owned a car matching the exact description. She hadn't mentioned him. Not once. Not even when police were asking about unfamiliar vehicles or unusual behavior. When questioned again, she admitted that her brother had been staying with her for a while, but insisted he had nothing to do with Emily. She even suggested Holt should stop fixating on her and look into Devin again, the janitor. Something about the way she shifted blame didn't sit right. Was she protecting someone? Or was she hiding something bigger? But the biggest twist hadn't even arrived yet. A package showed up at the police station. No return address. No fingerprints. Inside was a flash drive. It contained a single video file. And what was on that video would change everything. Because it wasn't just surveillance. It was something recorded by the killer. From inside Emily's house. The moment Detective Holt pressed play on the flash drive's video, he knew he was no longer dealing with a typical killer. The footage wasn't shaky or frantic like you might expect from a hidden camera. It was deliberate, slow, and intimate. Shot from a low angle behind a vent grill in Emily's living room, the video showed her sitting on her couch, completely unaware that someone was watching her. She scrolled on her phone, sipped a glass of wine, and flipped through a folder of lesson plans. Nothing unusual until the last few minutes, when she paused and looked directly toward the vent. She didn't say a word, but her expression changed. Her eyes narrowed. A subtle shift in her body, almost as if she sensed something. Then she stood, walked out of frame, and the video ended. No sound, no timecode, just that eerie feeling left behind, a creeping knowledge that whoever was behind the lens had been in that house more than once, and long before she was killed. Holt's mind spiraled. This wasn't just surveillance. This was someone sending a message. Someone playing God in a twisted game of power and fear. Just as Holt began running the video through forensic software, trying to track metadata or audio fragments that might have been buried in the file, another curveball hit, this time from someone far outside the circle of suspects. Emily's ex-husband, Brian, who had been cleared early in the investigation due to an airtight alibi, showed up at the station unannounced. His face was pale, his hands trembling. He wasn't there to talk about Emily's case directly, at least not at first. Instead, he slid a small, padded envelope across Holt's desk, his eyes darting toward the windows like he was being followed. Inside was an old engagement ring box, one Holt assumed was a keepsake from their marriage, until Brian explained what was inside. Not a ring. A SIM card. He'd received it in the mail that morning, with a note that simply read, "You missed this the first time." The number belonged to a burner phone Emily had used briefly during the divorce, a number no one knew about, especially not Brian. Holt had the SIM card analyzed, and what they found made no sense. There were messages sent from the number just days before her death, but not to anyone local. The contact saved as E had received texts in code, strings of numbers, odd phrases, and location pins. Holt checked the coordinates. One of them led to a highway rest stop 3 hours outside the city. The others? They were even more cryptic. One landed in the middle of a national forest. Another pointed to an abandoned church that had burned down years ago. There were no names, no explanations, just ghost trails leading nowhere. Unless, of course, Emily had been onto something and knew she was in danger long before she was killed. This discovery cracked the investigation wide open, but it also complicated it beyond belief. Holt now had to consider whether Emily's murder was the climax of a larger cover-up. Maybe she discovered something someone would kill to hide. And it didn't stop there. That same day, Holt got word that Rachel, Emily's sister, had been hospitalized.
Panic attack.
But when the hospital staff ran her belongings through intake, they found something tucked inside her coat pocket she swore she didn't put there. Another flash drive. This one was empty, completely blank. But the symbolism wasn't lost on Holt. Someone wanted Rachel to know they could reach her, at any time, in any place. And they wanted her to feel powerless. At this point, Holt couldn't shake the idea that someone within their own circle, someone trusted, was involved. The case had spiraled into a storm of misdirection and fear. Suspects who looked guilty now seemed like pawns. Alibis were being questioned. Even Melissa Graves, the once suspicious coworker who'd nervously deflected during her interview. But the distraction had worked. It had cost them time, which made Holt wonder, was Melissa just scared, or was she helping someone else run out the clock? And then came the biggest contradiction yet. It turned out to have a legitimate reason for hiding her brother's presence. He was on probation for a DUI and didn't want any attention. A new piece of forensic evidence arrived from the lab. A single hair found on Emily's sweater, one that didn't match any of the suspects. Not Brian. Not Melissa. Not Devin the janitor. Not even the mysterious Luke Madison. The hair belonged to a woman who hadn't been in their radar at all. And when they ran it through the system, they got a hit. A minor criminal record, petty theft and fraud, but a name that set off immediate red flags. Marla Jensen, Emily's biological mother. Except Emily had always told people her mother was dead. Now the question was, why did she lie? And why was her mother's DNA at the scene of her murder? Just as Holt began pulling Marla's background, Rachel called again, this time in a whisper, from a hospital hallway. Someone had sent her a photo of a gravestone. It had Emily's name on it. But the date wasn't her birthday. The moment Detective Holt saw the gravestone photo, his heart stopped, not because it looked real, but because of how real it felt. The lighting, the angle, Even the shadows of tree branches falling across the headstone, it wasn't some random image pulled from the internet. It had been taken recently in a real cemetery, and it had been taken for him. Emily's name, etched in clean serif font, was followed by a death date that hadn't arrived yet. April 25th, tomorrow. Whoever sent that photo wasn't just playing a game anymore. They were setting a clock. Holt stared at the image long after the call with Rachel ended, his fingers curling around the phone like he could crush it. The game had shifted into something colder, more personal. Someone wasn't just mocking the investigation, they were forecasting the next move. That night, Holt couldn't sleep. His instincts had always been sharp, but now they screamed in every direction, too loud to focus on any one threat. He tried to push through it, working late in the precinct, triple-checking the digital trail of the photo. Nothing. No metadata. No source. The email it was sent from had been created an hour before it arrived. No IP trail. No trace. Just digital smoke. Around 2 a.m., while sifting through a printed stack of Emily's old texts, Holt thought he saw a shadow move behind the frosted glass of his office door. He stood quickly, opening it to check the hallway, but it was empty. Just the hum of vending machines and the buzz of flickering fluorescents. He told himself it was nothing, but as he returned to his desk, his phone buzzed again. No number. Just a message. Leave it alone. She's already dead. You could be next. For the first time in his career, Holt felt real fear. Not the sharp jolt of surprise, but the low, sinking dread that coils around your gut and doesn't let go. He stared out the window of his office and saw a figure across the street, motionless, hooded, too far to identify, but they were watching. He was sure of it. When he rushed outside, gun holstered, the figure was gone. No car. No footsteps. Just the sound of a distant siren and a wind that carried the scent of rain. That moment changed something in him. This case wasn't about Emily anymore. It was about control.
Power.
The killer wasn't just trying to get away with murder. They were trying to rewrite the truth entirely, twist reality until no one could tell what was real and what was manipulation. The next morning, the department hit another wall. Rachel, Emily's sister, the only person left with a direct connection to her, vanished. She'd checked out of the hospital without telling anyone. No phone calls. No texts. She hadn't even picked up her discharge papers. Her car was still in the lot, keys in the ignition, phone on the passenger seat. The only thing missing was her purse and a black hoodie. Surveillance footage showed her stepping out of the front entrance around 4:15 a.m., but right before the camera cut off, a second figure joined her. Tall, male, wearing gloves. He placed a hand on her back. She didn't flinch. She didn't try to run. She just walked with him, like she knew him, or feared him enough not to resist. Holt watched that footage over and over, heart pounding, brain racing through every possible connection. Could it be the same man from Emily's case? Someone from the shadows of their past. Marla Jensen's world. Perhaps someone no one had considered yet? He didn't know. But the timing was too perfect. The video had been overwritten by the hospital's automatic storage system just hours later. The text swore it wasn't intentional, but Holt no longer trusted anything that could be accidentally deleted. That night, he returned home to his apartment, where he'd barely spent any time since the case began. But the comfort of familiarity didn't settle him. Instead, it only deepened the paranoia. The living room light had been turned off when he walked in, even though he was sure he'd left it on. The air felt colder than it should have. And when he stepped into the kitchen, he found a glass of water on the counter, filled halfway, with condensation still clinging to the outside like it had been poured recently. He lived alone. No one had a key. And yet, someone had been here. The only thing they took? His backup notebook. The one where he kept the timeline of Emily's last month alive. The one no one else knew about. Whoever this was, they weren't just watching, they were inside his life now, erasing his steps, rewriting his path. He wasn't chasing the killer anymore. The killer was chasing him. Every clue he uncovered now raised new questions instead of answers. Why did Emily lie about her mother being dead? Who sent the gravestone photo? And why tomorrow? What had Rachel discovered that made her leave the hospital willingly? And most importantly, why did the killer seem to know every move Holt would make, almost before he made it? In that moment of deep, creeping dread, Holt turned to the window once more. Parked across the street was a familiar black sedan. No plates, tinted windows, and the same silhouette inside. This time, the figure raised a hand and waved. Detective Holt couldn't stop staring at the black sedan. Every part of his brain screamed to run down there, rip the door open, and demand answers. But something in him, deeper than instinct, more primal than logic, told him to wait.
To watch.
And just like that, the car pulled away, merging into the late-night traffic without rushing, as if it belonged there all along. That wave wasn't a warning. It was a message, a confirmation, a signal that the person behind the glass knew him intimately, his schedule, his thoughts, his fears. It was a move designed not to threaten him, but to control him. He didn't know it yet, but that wave was the key to everything. It wasn't a threat. It was recognition. The next morning, Holt sat with a cold cup of coffee in his office, eyes locked on the security footage again. His mind reeled back to the person who had escorted Rachel from the hospital, someone she'd followed without resistance. For hours he ran through faces, cross-checked files, reached out to contacts. And then a call came in. Not from forensics, not from another precinct, but from internal affairs. It was the kind of call that knocked the wind out of him. Attached to the complaint was an audio file. A voice recording. His voice. Confessing that he had gotten too close and that if anyone found out it would all be over. Holt never remembered saying any of that. But there it was in his voice. His cadence. His inflection. It sounded real. Too real. The captain suspended him on the spot.
Badge. Gun. Desk. Gone. Just like that.
IA was investigating him. Someone had submitted a report, anonymous, detailed, and full of concerning behavior, including obsessive attachment to a murder victim, emotional instability, and improper evidence handling. And when he tried to play the recording for his closest friend in the department, Detective Kara Vance, her face went pale. Not because she thought it was damning, but because she had heard the same thing before. That file, she whispered, was used in another case.
2 years ago.
Different victim. Different detective. The moment she said it, the room spun. That recording wasn't just a fabrication.
It was a pattern.
Someone had used this exact tactic to silence other investigators. This wasn't a personal vendetta. It was part of something bigger. Kara pulled out her old case files and together, they found it. A cold case involving a woman named Lisa Merrick, killed under similar circumstances. Same email trail. Same manipulated surveillance footage. Same false audio file. The detective who led that case, Jason Rourke, disappeared shortly after being placed under investigation. IA said he resigned quietly. But Holt now believed otherwise. He remembered the black sedan, the silent observer, and the glass of water left on his kitchen counter. He wasn't just dealing with a lone killer anymore. He was being targeted by an orchestrated force, one that operated under the radar, using real evidence twisted just enough to destroy trust and derail investigations. As Holt and Kara continued digging, a new name surfaced: Martin Delacroix. A former cybersecurity expert turned corporate whistleblower who vanished 3 years ago after claiming a shadow group was tampering with justice system records and planting fake data to collapse cases from the inside. Delacroix had gone underground, but rumor had it he left a breadcrumb trail of data caches, encrypted clues hidden online and in physical locations, designed to expose everything if someone got close enough. One of those locations? A rented storage unit listed under Emily's old address. Holt's heart pounded as the pieces started connecting. When they arrived at the unit, everything was quiet. No sign of anyone following them. The storage space was ordinary: metal walls, a concrete floor, a single overhead light. But what was inside wasn't ordinary at all. There were photos. Dozens. Surveillance images of Holt, Kara, Emily, even the captain. Notes scribbled in code. GPS logs. And a hard drive. One that hadn't been accessed in over a year. Kara plugged it in using a forensic laptop, And that's when the truth began to unravel like a noose loosening around a neck. The files weren't just logs. They were part of a system. A digital framework designed to simulate voices, manipulate videos, and scrub metadata clean. It was sophisticated, beyond anything either of them had seen. Whoever ran this system wasn't just covering their tracks. They were rewriting reality. Then came the final twist. Buried in one of the subfolders was a recording. Not Holt's voice this time, but Emily's. A real one, dated a week before her death. In it, she's frantic, whispering into her phone. They're inside everything. They have access to my phone, my work, my friends. They know what I'm going to say before I say it. If I disappear, it's because I got too close. But it won't end with me. They have plans for Holt. For others. He doesn't even know yet. Holt's hands trembled. The truth wasn't that he failed her. It was that she died trying to protect him. She had known more than she ever let on. She tried to warn him through silence, through her lies, even through that cryptic voicemail that first led him into the rabbit hole. And now, the very people who orchestrated her death were watching him unravel it all. But before he could react, the storage unit lights flickered. A soft buzzing sound filled the air. And outside the thin metal walls, footsteps approached slowly, deliberately. Someone knew they were there. Holt's breath caught in his throat as the footsteps outside the storage unit halted, just inches from the door. Kara instinctively moved to kill the light, her fingers trembling as they hit the switch. Darkness swallowed them whole, broken only by the dim glow of the laptop screen. Neither of them dared speak. Seconds stretched into minutes, the silence louder than any scream. When the sound of retreating footsteps finally echoed down the corridor, Holt opened the door just a crack and scanned the hallway. Empty. But something had been left behind. On the ground lay a small manila envelope. No address, no markings. Inside was a single photograph, Holt standing outside his home, taken just hours earlier. On the back, scrawled in rushed black ink, were 6 chilling words: "Stop now, or she disappears like Emily." He didn't need to ask who she was.
Kara.
It was a clear message meant to hit hard, and it did. Back in his car, Holt sat in silence as Kara drove. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. The tension in her jaw said enough. When they pulled up to her apartment, she turned to him, eyes heavy, voice low. "You need to walk away from this." But Holt couldn't, not now. That was exactly what they wanted. Whoever was behind this wasn't just targeting him. They were using fear to manipulate truth, rewriting evidence, corrupting justice with artificial fingerprints and synthetic voices. If he backed down, everything Emily died for would be buried, erased. And he couldn't let that happen. But the pressure was building from all sides. He was no longer a detective. His credibility was destroyed. Friends and colleagues were cutting him off. One of the few left willing to talk was his former mentor, Lieutenant Sam Anders, a man who taught him how to read people, how to follow his instincts, and how to survive internal corruption. Holt hadn't spoken to Sam in years, not since the old man retired under a cloud of suspicion. But something told him Sam might know more than he let on. The visit to his cabin in the woods was anything but warm. Sam was cautious, reserved, like he was afraid even the trees had ears. When Holt showed him the photo and the audio files, Sam paled. Then he said something Holt never expected. "This isn't new. It's just evolved." According to Sam, a small unit within law enforcement used to run black-budget surveillance experiments, voice simulations, AI-driven reconstructions, digital forgeries. They were meant to be used for counterterrorism. But when funding dried up, the program splintered. A group broke off, went rogue, and began using the tech to bury people who threatened them. Whistleblowers, investigators, even civilians. It was never about profit. It was about control. Holt's blood ran cold. He wasn't just chasing a killer. He was chasing ghosts. A system built to erase truth before it ever had a chance to surface. Then came the ultimatum. It arrived via encrypted message, routed through 5 different servers. A link, a countdown timer, and a choice. Delete everything and walk away, or keep digging and watch Kara disappear. What if Kara wasn't who she said she was? What if all this time she had been guiding him, just enough to keep him from seeing the full picture? He turned toward her slowly, the weight of paranoia settling over his chest. She met his gaze without flinching, but something in her eyes, something new, made him hesitate. For the first time, he wasn't sure who was sitting next to him. It meant burying the truth so deep it'd never be found again. Holt's hand shook as he shut the laptop, his mind tearing itself in two. He could run, pack a bag, vanish, disappear like so many others.
Or he could stay. Fight.
Burn his life to the ground and expose this cancer, she said. Holt knew it was true. The GPS logs, the silent car outside his home, the tampered evidence. They had access to every device, every file, every camera. If they could forge his voice, they could frame him for anything. And they would, if he didn't comply. But walking away meant letting Emily die a second time. The screen flashed red every 60 seconds, a silent pulse of terror. Kara, sitting beside him, saw it too. Her face went rigid. They're watching us right now. The silence between Holt and Kara became suffocating. In the dim light of her apartment, the lines between ally and adversary blurred beyond recognition. Every memory he had of her, every late-night phone call, every impromptu visit, every panicked warning, now replayed through a darker lens. Was it all real, or just rehearsed moments in a game he never even realized he was part of? He wanted to believe in her, but that single flicker in her eyes, the one that didn't match the fear she was showing on the outside, kept eating away at him. Then her phone buzzed. She jumped. Holt watched as she checked the screen and quickly flipped it face down. "Who was that?" he asked, his voice flat. "No one," she said too fast. But the damage was done. He didn't press her. Not yet. Instead, he stepped outside to clear his head. The cold air hit him like a slap. That's when he saw it. The same car that had been tailing him for days. Dark SUV, tinted windows, parked just far enough away to blend in. But this time, someone was inside. Holt moved fast, down the stairs, across the sidewalk. He didn't stop when the engine revved. He stepped into the street, hand raised. "Get out," he yelled. But the window rolled down slowly, revealing a face he never expected to see again, Detective Lacey Grant. She'd disappeared from the force 2 years ago. Burned out, supposedly. PTSD from a failed hostage rescue. That's what everyone was told. But here she was, alive, sharper than ever, eyes scanning Holt like she was seeing through him. "Get in," she said. He hesitated, then obeyed. The doors locked the second he closed it. "You're not crazy," she said before he could speak. "They're real. And it's worse than you think." Holt blinked. "Who?" Lacey stared straight ahead. "The ones you're chasing. They've got ties in the Department of Justice, in state police, in private security firms. They've been experimenting with digital identity manipulation, not just on targets but on the public, media bots, deepfake leaks, synthetic scandals to distract from real crimes. Kara wasn't supposed to be part of this. She was the bait. But something changed. Now, they want her gone too." Everything tilted. "You're telling me Kara's not with them?" Lacey looked at him, pain in her eyes. She wasn't. Until she found something she wasn't supposed to. And now she's running scared. Holt leaned back, trying to breathe. "So, who's pulling the strings?" Lacey didn't answer. She reached into her coat and handed him a flash drive. "Play it. But not until you're off-grid. Go to the old ranger cabin near Gray Pine. You'll be safe there for a while. But after that, no one's safe." Then she shoved open the door and disappeared into the night before he could say another word. Back at the apartment, Kara was gone. No note. No sign of struggle. Just her necklace, the one she always wore, placed carefully on the kitchen table. The drive burned a hole in his pocket. Holt grabbed a bag, the burner phone, and keys. He was done reacting. It was time to fight back. He drove for hours, winding through dark backroads until the GPS stopped picking up any signal. The ranger cabin was abandoned, dust-filled, silent. He rigged the power and plugged in the drive. The files loaded slowly, revealing folders marked with agency tags: DOJ, DHS, even NSA. Each one held video clips, documents, emails, evidence of a web stretching across state lines and agencies. People were being digitally erased, careers destroyed, lives rewritten, truths turned into conspiracies with nothing but a manipulated video or voice recording. And right in the center of it all was a name Holt hadn't heard in a long time. Sam Anders. The betrayal hit harder than he expected. The one man he thought he could trust, the one who claimed to help him, wasn't just involved. He was the architect. His fingerprints were all over the files, project authorizations, voice memos, mission reports. Sam had built the system that now haunted Holt's every step. And Kara? She wasn't running from the system. She was running toward it, trying to dismantle it from the inside. Holt didn't sleep that night. He couldn't. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Emily's face. Her final voicemail. Her panic. Her fear. And now he saw the truth. This wasn't about revenge anymore. This was about justice. For her, for Kara, and for everyone else who never got the chance to speak before their lives were rewritten by a shadow that operated without consequence. But he was about to do something they never saw coming. Because buried deep in the files was a time-stamped video, dated just 1 week before Emily died. In it, she's talking to someone off camera.
He doesn't know yet, she says.
But Holt, he's the key. And that's when Holt realized. Emily knew everything before he did. And she'd left him the one clue that could bring it all crashing down. The rain hadn't stopped for hours, beating down in endless sheets that turned the old ranger cabin into a cage of echoing dread. Holt hadn't moved from the spot in front of the screen. The files Emily had left behind had taken him down one dark tunnel after another, but none of it prepared him for what came next. One final folder had been encrypted, layers deep, buried under code laced with fake flags and corrupted decoys. It took everything Holt had learned since the day his life fell apart to crack it open. And when he did, the screen filled with one silent video feed that drained the color from his face.
Kara.
She was sitting in a dimly lit room, arms bound behind her, blood dried across her forehead. Her lips moved slowly, shakily. "If you're seeing this, they've gotten to me," she said. "Sam isn't who you think he is. He's not just the architect, he's the one who ordered Emily's death. Even if it killed him. But the hardest part wasn't the danger. It was the doubt. Because deep down, buried beneath the adrenaline and panic, another question clawed its way to the surface. The walls closed in. Holt stumbled back, breath caught somewhere between rage and disbelief. It was always Sam. The friend who helped him bury his past, who offered protection when things spiraled, who whispered that sometimes justice had to be handled off the record. But it wasn't about protection, it was about control. Emily had uncovered the system Sam built, Project Echo, a clandestine program that allowed real-time manipulation of media, identities, even public opinion. When she found out what it was being used for, blackmail, political sabotage, framing innocence, she reached out to Kara, and they'd started building a digital trail. Sam found out. Emily died the next day. Holt grabbed his gear, loaded the flash drive with every piece of evidence he had, and drove through the storm, following coordinates Kara had mentioned once, in passing, when she thought no one was listening. An abandoned government data center near the outskirts of a decommissioned military town. The final layer of truth was waiting for him there, or so he thought. The entrance had been buried by overgrowth, barely visible in the flood-soaked earth. Holt found a service hatch and pried it open, descending into a cold maze of flickering lights and humming servers. Then he saw him. Sam Anders, waiting in the center of the control room, hands folded behind his back like a general surveying the battlefield. Kara stood beside him, unbound, expression unreadable. "Welcome to the end," Sam said. "You've done better than I expected." Holt raised the flash drive. "I have enough here to expose you." Sam smiled. "Do you really think anyone will believe it? After everything we've buried? You're just a man whose fiancée went crazy and killed herself. That's what the official report says. And we both know the public doesn't question the headlines." Holt stepped forward. "Then why bring me here?" Sam's gaze flicked to Kara. "Because she made a choice. A dangerous one. I gave her a way out, start over, disappear. But she insisted on finishing Emily's mission. You understand how that ends. Holt looked at Kara. Is that true? She didn't speak, but her eyes, wet, burning, said enough. I tried, she whispered, but I couldn't run. And then it happened. A flash. Kara lunged, not at Holt, but at the server's mainframe. She plunged a small device into the port, triggering a system-wide override. Alarms blared. Sam moved fast, pulling a concealed weapon. Holt tackled him, both men crashing to the floor in a flurry of fists, shouts, and broken cables. Years of buried fury exploded from Holt's fists. You killed her, he growled, slamming Sam's head against the floor. You used me. Sam, bleeding and laughing, spat blood. You still don't get it. There's no stopping this. But Holt wasn't listening. He saw the screens flashing red, data streaming to an external source. Kara had triggered the upload. The truth was out. Even if they didn't survive, the world would know. Suddenly, a sharp crack echoed through the room. Kara collapsed, a bullet in her shoulder. Sam stood, staggering, gun in hand. She was always too emotional, he muttered. But Holt had already moved. One final surge. One final strike. Sam fell, unconscious. The system was failing, lights blinking, sirens drowning out all other sounds. Holt grabbed Kara, dragging her through the corridor as the facility collapsed around them. Just before they reached the exit, Kara whispered, "There's something else." Outside, in the storm, Holt asked her what she meant. She looked up at him with pain and fear tangled in her voice. "I'm not just part of the leak," she said. "I helped design the prototype. Before I knew what they'd use it for. Before I knew what it would cost." Holt froze. And in that moment, as helicopters roared in the distance and lights flashed over the treetops, he realized this wasn't the end of the conspiracy. It was only the beginning. It took 3 months for the dust to settle. The data dump Kara triggered ricocheted through the internet like a lightning strike, crashing into public consciousness with a fury no algorithm could suppress. News outlets scrambled, social media exploded with hashtags like #ProjectEchoLeak and #DigitalBetrayal, and the nation reeled as high-ranking officials and well-known tech giants were implicated in what many now called the darkest misuse of artificial intelligence and surveillance technology ever exposed. The fallout was swift and unforgiving. Arrests, resignations, whistleblowers crawling out of hiding. But none of that erased the wreckage in Holt's life. The victories were measured in grief, in silence, in long nights spent staring at the wall of Kara's hospital room, waiting for the morphine to wear off just enough for her to speak again. Kara survived, though barely. The bullet fractured her shoulder, but the damage ran deeper than the physical wound. Every time she opened her eyes, she carried the weight of a world she helped design, a world that spiraled into something monstrous before she could stop it. And Holt, despite uncovering the truth, couldn't shake the hollowness that followed. Justice, they'd told him. Justice was served. But justice didn't bring Emily back. It didn't erase the betrayal, the years of manipulation, the moment he almost gave up. Still, in the quiet hours, as the public's rage began to fade and conspiracy theories were replaced by trending memes and political noise, Holt found himself walking the trail behind his cabin again. The woods looked different now, less like a prison and more like a place of clarity. The government launched a formal investigation into Project Echo, though few believed it would end with full transparency. Some of the evidence mysteriously vanished before hitting courtrooms. Others who were named in the leaks quietly disappeared. The deeper machine, Holt knew, was still turning. But for the first time, it wasn't running unchallenged. The truth had been pulled from the shadows, and that mattered, even if the scars remained. Kara published her own account under a pseudonym, a chilling first-hand account of how power and technology collided to erase ethics from decision-making. It went viral overnight, landing her on several watch lists, even as she retreated from public view. Holt didn't stop her. He understood now that survival wasn't about hiding, it was about knowing when to speak and when to wait for the next storm. One evening, months later, Holt received a package with no return address. Inside was a USB drive and a note written in clean, methodical handwriting. You missed something. Not all files were purged. It's still happening off the grid. Don't stop. No name. No explanation. But as he plugged the drive into his offline laptop and watched new folders begin to decrypt, files labeled with names he didn't recognize, footage from places he'd never been, a cold wave ran down his spine. The story wasn't over. The system had evolved. Somewhere out there, another version of Echo was humming in the background, waiting to rewrite the next narrative, to disappear the next whistleblower, to erase the next inconvenient truth. Holt closed the lid of the laptop and stood in the fading light of his porch, the sun sinking beneath the treetops in a smear of burnt orange. There was peace in the air, but not certainty. That would never come. In a world built on secrets and shadows, the only way forward was to stay one step ahead of the lie. And as the wind rustled through the trees like a whisper from the past, Holt knew that truth, no matter how dangerous, was a war worth waging again and again. Because sometimes the real enemy wasn't just a person. It was the story they wanted you to believe.